Hello everyone, and welcome everyone for joining me for another talk on the significant impact Cleopatra had on the development of the Roman Empire. Cleopatra was a queen who was famed for her beauty, intelligence, and political prowess. She is considered to be one of the most famous and powerful queens in history. She was the last pharaoh of Egypt, and throughout her lifetime she had a huge influence on the Roman Empire. Stay tuned with us because we are going to discuss who Cleopatra was and how she had an impact on the Roman Empire in this video. Cleopatra was born in the year 69 BC in the Egyptian city of Alexandria. She belonged to the Ptolemaic dynasty, which took over Egypt following Alexander the Great's passing and ruled for several centuries. Ptolemy XIV. Auletes was not only Cleopatra's father, but also the father of her brother. She was the first member of her family to become fluent in Egyptian and to adopt the traditions and customs of the nation. Cleopatra was renowned for her beauty, as well as her brilliance and charisma. She was proficient in a number of languages, including Egyptian, Greek, and Latin, among others. Cleopatra was an influential patron of the arts and sciences, in addition to being a shrewd politician during her day. Cleopatra was a savvy politician who knew the significance of making alliances with great kings. She used these ties to her advantage throughout her reign. She was aware that Egypt did not possess the resources necessary to maintain its independence, so she turned to Rome for assistance and security. Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, two of the most powerful men in Rome at the time, both became romantically connected with Cleopatra. Her associations with these individuals helped her to secure her position as Queen of Egypt and provided her with a large degree of political power in Rome. Her relationships with these men also helped her to solidify her status as Queen of Rome. Before March 22, 51 BC, when Cleopatra, in her first official act as queen, set out for Hermonthis, close to Thebes, to place a new sacred Bacchus bull, which was revered as a substitute for the god Montu in ancient Egyptian religion, Ptolemy XII passed away. Soon after ascending to the throne, Cleopatra had to deal with a number of urgent situations. These included lawless behavior fostered by the Gabiniani, the now unemployed and assimilated Roman troops left by Gabinius to garrison Egypt, and famine brought on by drought and a low level of the yearly flooding of the Nile. Cleopatra owed 17.5 million drachmas to the Roman Republic in addition to inheriting her father's debts. Proconsul of Syria, Marcus Calpurnius Bibulus, dispatched his two eldest sons to Egypt in 50 BC, most likely to negotiate with the Gabiniani people and enlist them as troops in Syria's frantic fight against the Parthians. These two were tortured and killed by the Gabiniani, possibly with the help of rogue senior officials in Cleopatra's court. As captives awaiting his decision, Cleopatra transferred the Gabiniani offenders to Bibulus. However, Bibulus returned them to Cleopatra and reprimanded her for interfering with the Roman Senate's decision-making process. In Caesar's civil war, Bibulus, who supported Pompey, was unable to stop Caesar from deploying a naval fleet in Greece, which ultimately allowed Caesar to pursue Pompey into Egypt. Official records began naming Cleopatra as the sole ruler by August 29, 51 BC, showing that she had rejected her brother Ptolemy III as a co-ruler. There is no record of her possibly wedlocking him. Ptolemy II and his sister Arsinoe II established the Ptolemaic custom of sibling marriage. It was a long-standing royal Egyptian custom that the Greeks of the time detested. But by the time of Cleopatra, it was seen as a typical setup for Ptolemaic kings. Ptolemy XIII still had strong allies despite Cleopatra rejecting him, most notably the eunuch Pothinos, his childhood tutor, regent, and manager of his estates. Achillas, a well-known military leader, and Theodotus of Chios, another one of Ptolemy III's tutors, were additional participants in the plot against Cleopatra. In the autumn of 50 BC, Ptolemy XIII gained the upper hand in their battle and started signing documents with his name before that of his sister. This was followed by the formation of his first regnal date in 49 BC. Cleopatra appears to have made a brief attempt at an alliance with her brother, Ptolemy XIV. After being driven from Egypt by her brother, Cleopatra formed an alliance with Julius Caesar, which proved to be a crucial factor in her successful bid to reclaim her rightful place on the throne. Caesar arrived at Alexandria in the year 48 BC and quickly became entangled in the power struggle that was taking place between Cleopatra and her brother. Cleopatra is infamous for sneaking into Caesar's palace while wrapped in a carpet in order to meet him. Following their encounter, the two started a sexual relationship. Caesar was instrumental in Cleopatra's success in vanquishing her brother and reclaiming her rightful place atop the Egyptian monarchy. He also assisted her in strengthening her grip on power inside the country. In exchange, Cleopatra became a devoted ally of Rome and supported Caesar in his various political endeavors. Cleopatra was also Caesar's political advisor. After Caesar was killed in 44 BC, Cleopatra began a relationship with Mark Antony, who had been one of Caesar's closest friends and allies. Mark Antony was one of Caesar's closest friends and allies. Cleopatra's prominence in Roman politics was greatly aided by Antony's romantic involvement with her. At the time, Antony was one of the most influential men in Rome, and his relationship with Cleopatra served to solidify her position. After having 3 children together, Cleopatra and Antony were inseparable partners in love as well as in politics during their time together. The relationship between Cleopatra and Antony was profitable for both Egypt and Rome in the long run. Cleopatra's war against Antony's brother required military backing, and Antony was able to give that for her. In addition, he was able to help stabilize the situation in Egypt. In exchange, Cleopatra backed Antony in his political endeavors and assisted him in retaining his control in Rome. Octavian, who was Caesar's adopted son and heir, and who later became the first Roman emperor, saw their partnership to be a threat. Octavian eventually became the ruler of all of Rome. Octavian began a campaign directed against Antony and Cleopatra, which resulted in the latter's and the former's loss at the Battle of Actium in 31 BC. Both Cleopatra and Antony committed suicide rather than being captured by Octavian, and their deaths marked the end of the Ptolemaic dynasty and the beginning of the Roman Empire. Cleopatra and Antony were the last rulers of the Ptolemaic dynasty. Even after she had passed away, Cleopatra continued to have a considerable impact on Roman politics. She had made an indelible mark on Roman society and culture, notably in the fields of art and literature. And this had been especially true of the former. Her beauty and personality were legendary, and as a result, she served as an inspiration to a large number of artists and authors of the time. For instance, William Shakespeare penned a play about her called Antony and Cleopatra, which is one of the most well-known and frequently staged plays about her even today. The economic well-being of Egypt improved as a result of Cleopatra's partnership with Rome. During her reign, commerce between Egypt and Rome thrived, and the rising demand in Rome for Egyptian goods like papyrus, grain, and textiles contributed to the growth of Egypt's economy. Cleopatra was responsible for the construction of various public works in Egypt, such as libraries, temples, and irrigation systems, among other things. Her leadership was one of Egypt's most prosperous and culturally significant periods, and she is still held in high esteem as one of the country's most powerful monarchs. Cleopatra did have some favorable effects on the Roman Empire, but she also had some negative ones. It was believed that her associations with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony posed a danger to the security of the Roman Republic. A great many of Romans despised the influence that Cleopatra had on their leaders, and they feared that she might attempt to seize control of Rome. As a consequence of this, there was a backlash against Cleopatra, and she was portrayed in an unfavorable light in Roman literature and propaganda. As an illustration, the historian Plutarch penned a biography of Antony in which Cleopatra was portrayed as a lady who was manipulative and alluring and who had corrupted Antony. Cleopatra was portrayed as an evil and immoral foreign queen thanks to Octavian's use of propaganda, which also served to demonize Cleopatra. This unfavorable depiction of Cleopatra has endured throughout history, and many people continue to view her as a villain and a seductress. The relationship that Cleopatra forged with Rome resulted in bad repercussions for Egypt as well. By allying herself with Rome, she rendered Egypt dependent on Roman backing, which in the end led to Rome's conquest of Egypt. This was due to the fact that she allied herself with Rome. Following Cleopatra's death, Rome annexed Egypt as a province, and as a result, Egyptian culture and customs were gradually supplanted by Roman ways of doing things. This conquest signaled the beginning of Egypt's integration into the Roman Empire and signified the end of Egypt as an independent kingdom. In conclusion, Cleopatra wielded a substantial amount of power over the Roman Empire, which she exercised in both positive and negative ways. Her political influence in Rome was significantly increased as a result of her connections with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, which helped her to consolidate her position as Queen of Egypt and gave her substantial sway in Roman politics. Her leadership was one of Egypt's most prosperous and culturally significant periods, and she is still held in high esteem as one of the country's most powerful monarchs. However, Many people viewed her influence on Roman politics as a threat, and her bad representation in Roman literature and propaganda has continued all the way through history. Egypt suffered further repercussions as a result of her partnership with Rome, which ultimately resulted in the country's conquest and inclusion into the Roman Empire. Cleopatra left behind a controversial legacy. Nonetheless, there is no doubting the influence that she had on the world of the ancients. Her knowledge, charisma, and political savvy were astounding for a woman living during that time period, and she continues to be a symbol of women's emancipation and leadership today. If you found the video to be educational and enlightening, don't forget to give it a like, leave a comment, and sign up for the channel. I am grateful that you decided to watch.